let's get it. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm super happy to be the host of this SusTalk. I think it's the first time I'm doing that, and gives me great happiness to do this on behalf of SusMafia. We have a wonderful guest with us who I've been working with some time through the SusMafia, and who's really one of the most, mm, he's like a really practical doer who is a lot of fun to work with, always thinks different, and always brings a lot to the work engagements. So let me describe him. So we have Anveshi here. Anveshi is the founder CEO of AtQuest, which is a company which SusMafia is partnering with for the Corporado program. And he describes himself as unconventionally practical, looking forward to the day when he can make himself and his company redundant, when sustainability becomes people-owned, people-centric, and people-driven. And until that happens, he wants to work on behavior change at an institutional and individual level, which is a challenging problem. So about the SusTalk, it's really, we're going to be talking about the kinds of concepts and principles which AtQuest applies to do what they do, including towards corporate sustainability, which is the major focus of the sustainability mafia. So, Anveshi, I won't take any more of your time. I just extend a very warm welcome on behalf of the community and everybody here. And like everyone else, I'm thrilled to have you here, and can't wait to see what you have to say. So, over to you.
Super. Thanks, Hari. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for the SusMafia folks to keep organizing these SusTalks, which definitely are very enriching. And everyone else who's on the call, thanks for taking time off on your Saturday. So I'm hoping it's going to be a fruitful 60 minutes of our time on a Saturday morning. So yeah, I'll get into this straight away. A couple of aspects before I get started. I just want to make sure that I'll tell you where I come from to start with. So I've got about a couple of decades of experience in the corporate industry, technology implementations, consulting, smart cities consulting to be as the latest work profile that I carried before I started at Quest. I quit my job. I spent a good 1 year doing some research, talking to people, secondary, primary, all kind of research conversations. Thereafter, I think about 14 months back is when we said, okay, we're ready to get going in the shape and form that we are today. I think that's the first step we took in that direction somewhere April last year, through the lockdown pretty much. And yeah, so that's where I think I'd start off. And then while I've seen folks who've joined on the call, I'm just hoping and believing that all of us have this keen interest in sustainability, and that's why we're here. While that is the case, at least personally, I feel, and so it could possibly be a fairly general feeling with a lot of folks out there. When I started on the whole journey of sustainability in my personal sphere, and also in terms of what we're doing with AtQuest, I kind of was a little taken aback by the complexity that surrounds that term sustainability. Not just sustainability, in fact, climate change as well. The two terms, when I kind of heard them the very first time, I would say, consciously heard them the first time, I think I wasn't very sure what this entails. And I'll be honest, even today, I think I am kind of opening up new layers pretty much every other day. So the abstractness of that particular term, sustainability or climate change, climate action for that matter, complexity, the ambiguity possibly that surrounds it, the mystery, if I could call it so, and more importantly, the vivid viewpoints that come when you talk sustainability. It's so much of a layered thing that it's definitely not so easy to comprehend it on first go. And I'm sure it's going to be a journey of sorts in that very sense. So with that context is what I would want you to kind of walk into this conversation for the next few minutes, and that will help kind of appreciate what I'm going to talk through. So yeah, I'm going to get started. One sec. Yeah. All right. So that's how I would put our own selves at Quest as an entity. Social enterprise, a tech-enabled social enterprise at that, with the purpose of driving what we call behavioral change. And by that, we definitely mean behavioral change individually and behavioral change as an institution, whether you call it an institution as a corporate institution, an educational one, or what we also consider as a residential setup or society of sorts as an institution. So those kind of aspects as well, individual and institutional behavioral change. Future-proofing enterprise growth stories, balancing that triple bottom line approach, profit, people, and planet that we talk of. So that's important with all the work we do. And further on, I think tomorrow's informed change makers, which of course happen to be the school kids or the Gen Z category that we would want to call them as. So those are the folks who definitely are going to take the planet ahead from where we leave it. And unfortunately, let's be honest, we're not leaving it in a good state at this point. So yes, so they definitely have to be a lot more informed, and that's another focus of our work. How do we go about it? We kind of identify various user experiences that will drive it, and that's one of the conversations, one of the aspects that I'll cover during the conversation. We use a lot of tech as an enabler to do what we do. So technology is a definite key component of what we do, and we've got very uniquely developed methodologies to approach this. So these three components kind of come together in a very complementing manner to build out what we call as our value proposition. So that's the context of AdQuest and what it is all about. But I'll get into the details of what AdQuest is all about in further detail in a few minutes. As I go to the next slide, I want you to kind of appreciate the fact that we definitely are more of what I would call a horizontal sustainability services company. What I mean by that is we definitely are not going to claim to be the experts on the verticals of sustainability, in which case I'm talking of things like waste management, things like water management, things like greens and forestry and stuff like that. So that's not the primary expertise we come with. What we come with is the fact that we cover the breadth, while definitely there are huge number of experts out there who are very, very proficient at the depth part of it on each of these topics. So we cover the breadth. And while we do that, we definitely have an eye on various segments of urban India. We put them down here. Corporates definitely is one. We've got schools that we talk of, and then we talk of residential societies. I briefly did mention that. Urban citizens, and that by which I mean individuals who are staying in a city. That's the intent there. Sustainability experts, and these are the folks whom I would have referred to as the partners in our journey and the experts in the verticals that I was mentioning a while back. So these are very key. And since we're talking on the SusMafia platform, the Mafia source is the closest parallel you could draw to what we call the sustainability experts. So those are the broad segments we focus on. And while doing that, of course, these guys will receive and see a sense of value in engaging with us. But more importantly, we do not stop there, but we look at these engagements to drive what we call benefits for the larger, for the lesser privileged segments, let's call them so, of the society, the communities, the government schools, of course, our planet. The fact that all of it has got to come together for us to kind of have a future, a longer future livable planet, let's say. That's the idea. And of course, the fact that we use a lot of tech enables us to feed that tech into what we call research and policy making exercises, whether it is public policy making exercises or even institutional policy making exercises, both of them put together. But at the end of the day, we intend to kind of drive that with whatever work we do with the segments that we have shown here on the top. So that's the context. Now, like I said, I'll definitely focus a lot more on what we do. But before we get there, I'm going to just take a step back and get into what I'm referring here as the system of systems view. The fact is, like I said earlier in the conversation, climate action, climate change, sustainability, quite complex, quite layered, number of players, a lot of interactions, a lot of intersections, so to say. And how do you kind of bring it all together? And that's what we were attempting to do when we sat down. And what we came up with is kind of an ecosystem in which AdQuest operates. And I'm going to paint this picture one click at a time. So just bear with me. So we are starting with what you see at the bottom as a residential society, and the common the common people stay there. So the adults or the kids who stay there, plus the fact that society by itself has some sort of an association that manages it. And that's the starting point. I'm going to click further. The association possibly could organize workshops, and I'm in this context, since we're talking of what we do as AdQuest, we are definitely referring to workshops of the nature of let's say, gardening and solar energy and stuff like that, which are relevant from a sustainability perspective. So those kind of workshops are organized by the RWS. They also plan and execute community projects within their own community, which is what I mean, in which in the community projects, there's a good scope for adults or kids to volunteer if they wanted to. Of course, not every association does that, but that's one of those things that we want to kind of also drive towards. How do we kind of engage the folks in those kind of experiences which are very much accessible within the community? They could participate and learn in these workshops as well. So that's the idea of this small piece that we've just seen. Now take it a step further. We're talking of the kid, the student, of course, studying at a certain school, and that school by itself educating the kid about sustainability and climate change. And in that very process of educating the student, they could definitely look at avenues to involve parents or guardians in the student's learning journey. What that will make happen is conversations at home between parents and kids, which is the most essential part of achieving scale, let me say so, in that sense. So that is one thing we want to drive towards, where we're educating the kids, the schools educating the kids. How do they kind of involve the other stakeholders, in this case, the parents, also in the equation? And thereafter, the school by itself, within their own vicinity, within their own campuses, could execute green projects. And I'll give you more sense of that when we get into the further details. But green projects, again, here could mean the fact that they are going, they're trying to address the waste in their campus. They're trying to grow greens in their campus. They're trying to have rainwater harvesting setups in their campus, things of that nature. And who does that? A certain sustainability expert would come into picture, and that's the person who's going to implement those kind of projects. Taking it one step further, we talking of the fact that, of course, the private schools got teachers. Teachers stay in these residential societies, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking of the fact that individuals stay at homes, and homes are part of a community or a society in that sense. Take this another step further. Adults in the society typically would be employed with a corporate. They are employed with, or possibly if they're not employed with a corporate, so to say, they definitely are buying products or taking services from a certain corporate. I mean, whether you go to a supermarket and buy stuff or whichever way you do, you still are making purchases that are tying back to what the corporate is serving you. And that's the point that we're driving here. Looking at it from a corporate perspective, they engage and they employ a lot of folks. In this case, I've taken a small subset. I'm talking of roles that are far more familiar or relevant in the context of what we do. CSR heads, HR heads, CSO, which is the Chief Sustainability Officer, or the BR, which is the Business Responsibility Department or unit head. So CSO or the BR heads, HR head and CSR heads, we see them to be key constituents of how we look at the corporate entity. And so why do we say that? The CSO or the BR head, what is his stake in this whole conversation? He would make sure that he engages with stakeholders across value chain, by which I mean the way the corporate goes about doing their procurement, their suppliers and distributors, choices they make when they decide who their suppliers or distributors are, the choices they make when they decide on the kind of projects they want to implement. These are supposed to be, at the end of the day, because it's a corporate implementing it, they would typically look at them being carbon reduction projects if it was the CSO who's looking at it. Of course, the same project's implementation when it comes to the other side, but since it's the CSO, is going to definitely look at carbon reduction engagements of the projects. So those green projects are implemented by the corporate through the CSO's office. The CSO himself would make sure that the employees who are part of the organization are getting an opportunity to appreciate the aspect of sustainability. The CSO, that's the reason he's that office. He's got to make sure that the stakeholders, the internal stakeholders or the employees are on the same page as the organization itself. So the awareness building happens through different workshops on sustainability. Now, while that is happening, who's doing the green projects and workshops? Yet again, we're bringing in the fact that the sustainability expert will come into picture. Maybe the same guy who did work projects for the school year, maybe a different guy, because here, when you talk of corporates, you're talking of it more from a carbon emission perspective. You're talking of being a very climate science centric. So could be the same person, could be a different guy, but at the end of the day, we still need an expert to do it. And then the employees, like I was mentioning a while back, the CSO would help drive behavioral change. And in that process of him intending to drive behavioral change, he's going to seek services or the help of the HR head who will engage the employees in that conversation. And then the CSR department. The CSR department, of course, has its eye on social impact. What are we doing from a community perspective? So they engage with the community to benefit them from whatever CSR funding and engagements they are driving. Those CSR engagements that are done with the community, of course, benefit the stakeholders of the community, would be the adults or their school teachers, student who's going to a government school, etc. Not to mention the fact that this government school entity that have we popped up here also starts educating the kids and the fact that they employ the government school and taking it, and the fact that the private school entity could also now start supporting a certain government school. And we've got a way to kind of do that. We run what we call a one-for-one program, which I'll get to later, but that's the idea of engaging a private school entity with the government school entity out here. And the collaboration is what will take shape here. Thereafter, you would also see that the employees are able to volunteer for these community projects that are happening with the community, or for that matter, participate in workshops, participate in so-called green projects. All of it is possible, and that provides a new avenue to kind of engage your employees in a different manner. It is happening quite honestly, but it's very sporadic. What we're trying to do with this approach that I'm trying to mention is make it a lot more organized, lot more in sync with the needs out there. That's the idea of the ecosystem. So it's a complex picture, quite honestly, but that's what an ecosystem or a system of systems would have looked like. It couldn't have been simpler than this, quite honestly. Now, if that is the entire ecosystem, if you were to kind of look at it from a corporate-centric view, so just the system of the corporates itself. So that's the subsystem, I would call, of how the corporate would look at the various constituents that they interact with. So that's what's highlighted here. If it was to be looked at from a different perspective, in this case, the schools, the constituents change themselves. Of course, there could be a few overlaps, but that's the idea of how you would look at the system from a school's perspective. And of course, the residential societies is another mix, which has got a different set of constituents. You would observe that the sustainability experts are pretty much omnipresent across. So you cannot say the sustainability in any context is the way we have kind of concluded out of this particular exercise that we did. So the sustainability experts are definitely are pretty much an essential aspect of every system within the system of systems that we're talking. So that's the context. So if you kind of see the elements out there, the complexity out there, how do we kind of make it simpler? Because that's what our tagline is supposed to mean. I mean, sustainability simplified. If that's what we're saying we are, and we kind of are still talking about the fact that it is that complex an ecosystem, how do we kind of make it happen? And that's where we have got what we call our two verticals. We've got something called the AdQuest Care vertical and something called the AdQuest Life vertical. With AdQuest Care, we focus on institutional efforts, focus on as climate care, which is where, of course, climate strategies, climate action strategies come into picture, and strategic engagement. So these are conversations that will have to happen at a CXO level for us to kind of bring it down to a larger section of the organization, through which is of course the employees in the organization, and for that matter, the external stakeholders as well, the suppliers, the regulators, the investors, and who not. Right, all of those. So that's why we kind of bring them all together. Institutional efforts, climate care, and strategic engagements under this brand called the AdQuest Care brand. Then there is the AdQuest Life, which is more about how one goes about leading their daily life. So green lifestyle is a key aspect of the AdQuest Life brand. We're looking at individual efforts, you, me, and everyone that around us. How do we kind of make a transition towards a green lifestyle? And then, of course, the community efforts, which is where you're scaling your own work that you're doing as an individual self into an engagement with folks around you, with like-minded folks, with folks who are possibly not like-minded yet, but you're trying to influence them into transitioning as well. While I say we operate in two verticals, I'm very honest. The line between these two can easily be blurred because they are not so isolated. So we are realizing that the green lifestyle aspects is crucial when we talk of institutional effort. The CXOs that we spoken to, they've mentioned that while we could do all we want to do from a strategic perspective, we are kind of losing the game if our employees aren't on board, aren't appreciative, aren't having a sense of connect with what we are doing as a corporate sustainability initiative. So that's why I mentioned that the lines are blurred. In fact, one of each of these aspects that we talk of here could positively influence the other. To the contrary, of course, if not done right, it could also have a negative influence. So the same brands, in terms of the segments that I was mentioning earlier, we focus on corporate, schools, and sustainability experts when we talk of care. And then we talk of urban citizens and residential societies when we talk of at Quest Life. So the two segments have their distinct segment focus. Wherever required, of course, there's the interplay between the two brands that happen, two verticals that happen. And yeah, we kind of deal with it on a case-to-case basis. But quite honestly, it is bound to happen. While that is the approach, that was the complex ecosystem and the segments that we focused on the brands, how do we kind of try to make it consistent when we engage with these stakeholders, the segments that I was talking about? So we keep it very simple. We take a 4-step approach: learn, act, achieve, and celebrate. Irrespective of the segment, whether it's a corporate institution, whether it's an individual, whether it's a school, whether it is a kid who's a Gen Z, whether it's a millennial, whoever it is, we take a simple approach, which is learn, act, achieve, and celebrate. So I think in that sense, learn, act, achieve, it's very obvious, self-explanatory in terms of the words that they are. We are trying to start at a point where we're building a lot of awareness, driving a lot of education on topics that are tough to digest in a far more simplistic manner. That's what we do. Once we have driven that sort of an awareness, how do we get them to start doing things that they can do in their capacities? Again, individual capacity or institutional. Having done what they did, how do you give them a sense of achievement with very visual dashboards and visual numbers that would kind of give them a sense of accomplishment? And then thereafter, for the fact that they've achieved, how do we kind of get them to celebrate their accomplishments in the way that they would probably love doing? So that's the process. And of course, this is not a linear process. I think it's definitely iterative, because once you get there, there's still so much more. Like I said, even today, there's so many more layers that are yet to be peeled off. So there will always be going back to a learn from here. So there's that cyclic aspect to it. So that's the simplistic view of how we kind of drive the approach: learn, act, achieve, and celebrate. And if that was the approach, and we were to look at one of the ways that we drive it, we're talking of gamification and dashboarding here. I'm assuming folks on the call are fairly familiar with the terms, but if we are not, I'm quickly going to spend a minute on this. Gamification is the idea of bringing in a game-like experience into what would typically be a non-game-like area. So sustainability would typically not be a game-like area, but if you could make it far more appealing by bringing in game-like experience, by that I mean, how do you kind of give them accomplishment when they've done something good? How do you kind of tell them how they stand against their peers? How do you kind of give them a sort of gratification with a badge or something where they kind of take pride in doing that again and again, probably come back and do it again if they wanted to? How do you give them a sort of different levels and jumping levels and kind of progressing in that journey experience? That's what gamification is about. Dashboarding is all the fact is, when we have a lot of data, it is an incentive, but then it's only an incentive when you put it across to the audience in the right manner. So the dashboarding aspect is making sure that with all the data that we would have access to with the work that we do across segments, how do you kind of put it across in a manner that becomes easy to consume, easy to identify what one would call insights from the data, and possibly use it for a progression or improvement from where you are today to where you intend to be in the coming days. So that's the idea of those two things. So gamification and dashboarding. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough of this tool that we call the Green Compass. I'm switching screens quickly. Yeah. So this is the screen of the green compass. I've logged in. So you could, by the way, if anyone wants to log in, all they have to do is go there, live.atquest.in, and you could create your own account. Just an email ID is all it asks for, nothing more, and you're ready to get going. So I'll just show you what the experience is all about. The green compass. Before I get to show you the experience, I'll just show you, since we just passed by the dashboarding topic, I'll kind of spend a little time on the dashboarding aspect. So you notice that we're talking of an individual out here, an individual who's using the green compass. This is all about individuals' behavioral change, and in which in the context of which we're saying the individual definitely have a lot to do at his own at his own home, so his or her own home. And so in that context, what is it that this person can do, and how do you make sure that you're not missing out aspects? And that's where we bring in a 360-degree view of that particular action. And these dashboards are coming out of a certain task you would have done, and I'll get to the task in a while. But just spend a little time on the fact that there are points that you would notice on these different pies of the chart, and each of those points are mapping to what you notice as different labels here: green warriors, nature lovers, waste managers, renewables rock stars, and all of these 8. They are essentially a reflection of various aspects of sustainability.
Anveshi,
green warriors, of course, is
Anveshi, sorry to interrupt. Just a time check. We have about 15 minutes, just so that you know. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Please go on. Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, these are the 8 tribes in terms of making sure that you cover 360-degree view of sustainability for the individual. And you would see the progress as you start taking up a few actions that you complete. And thereafter, you also start seeing what we call the global impact of your tiny little actions, if I could call them so. The fact is, every little action counts, and that's what we're trying to present here. Sustainability goals, SDGs, definitely something that most of us on the call, all of us, I hope, are familiar with. With each of those goals, how are we making sure that we are seeing a reflection of our actions on these goals? And that's the percentage progress you see here. So at this point, I've progressed 35% with whatever I've ticked off on my list, and I've contributed 35% in my own capacity towards climate action as an SDG goal. So that's the point that we're driving here. Now, what makes this all happen? I'm going to go to a new action, start a new action. I'm going to say, I want to look at what actions I can do at home, what actions I can probably do in the nature lovers tribe, possibly one more. I'll pick renewables rock stars just for the sake of it. I've got a bunch of actions, if you notice. I exercise in a natural environment. I use natural ventilation. I stay in a house built with eco-friendly materials, etc., etc. And there are a bunch of those actions even further down. So with each of those actions, you get a sense of what is it that you could do in your own capacity. And if those were the actions, I grow flowering plants to attract bees and butterflies. Let me say I do that, and that's what I intend to claim as something that I do. And so I'm going to go here, mark as complete. The moment I mark as complete, I get to see the fact that I've achieved it, of course, but more importantly, I get to see the contribution I've done to on 2 different pies of that green compass dashboard you saw, nature lovers. And while the action was tied to nature lovers, I have also contributed to what I would say a local champion tribe. So nature lover tribe and a local champion tribe, on both those axes, I have earned myself some points. And in the same process, I have progressed or contributed progressively to a couple of SDGs. Goal number 13, which is climate action. Goal number 15, which is life on land. So that's the other aspect that I gathered from here. More importantly, I have also earned myself, currently with this one action that I just did, I've earned myself a level up, which means to say I've unlocked the next level. Earlier, I had the community home level opened up for nature lovers. I did not have the community level. I have now unlocked it. And now I could go about accessing that. And if you wanted to publish your achievement on social media, we could always do that on your behalf. But if you want to leave it where it is, you could always click on go to green compass, and this whole dashboard will repaint itself. So I've now progressed on nature lovers from a 71 that it was earlier to a 76. And in that very process, also contributed further on to the SDGs. Right? So that's the idea of this dashboard. And what it will also do is give you a timeline view of your work or your achievements, your tasks that you're completing, and you could go on as further down as you want to in terms of how much more historical aspects of your journey do you want to track. These are your actions that we're talking about. We have a way to look at badges specifically. There's badges that you keep earning as you progress. And so I last earned a badge on 11th of June. So that's what I see. Before that, it was 1st of May. So I keep, when I keep progressing, there are different badges that I keep earning, and those badges also start making their presence felt. I have a small recommendation engine that I could also use if I wanted to. This one is going to look at the fact that you've done a different set of actions till this point, and based on where you are, based on how far you've progressed, based on what's ahead of you, it will propose that these are the next 4 best actions for you to start looking at. You may not agree, and you may leave them as they are, and you can still do it by yourself. But if you want a sort of a guide to help you there's some intelligence built in to give you recommendations. So that's the long story short of this green compass. It's definitely something that helps you with simpler actions to see how you are progressing on your sustainability journey and impacting at in a larger scale. You get to see your timeline in terms of your journey thus far. You also kind of see you earn badges, you earn you got your own level ups that you have. You can compare yourself with different folks. We also announce every month the top 10% performers of the month. So there's also that sense of leaderboard that it comes with. That was the green compass that we talked of. So that's with that green compass, what we intend to also do is drive that same experience at scale with different constituents. I'm leaving this slide on the screen for you to read through. There's a lot of data in there, but what I'm going to definitely focus on is this column out here. So the fact is, each of these green compass variants, like I would call them, are focusing on individual behavior or institutional behavioral change. The user profile for each of them differs: adults, school students, CXOs, or school management. The usage experience, what are we talking about? When you talk of the individual behavior, you're talking of helping them progress on a journey. That's the intent. When you talk of the institutional behavioral change, you're trying to help them baseline themselves and decide the direction they want to take from there on to get to where they want to. Sample actions. This is just to give you a sense of the kind of actions that will be there, where you could say, I have done it, I want to mark as complete. The kind of impact areas, like in the green compass, you saw home, community, and city, those 3 circles there. When you go to a different segment, these change because, of course, the context is very different. For student, it's home, school, and outdoors. For the corporate, it is about the emissions category, the scope 1 emissions, scope 2 emissions, and scope 3 emissions. Those are the emission categories that are recognized industry-wide. And then when it comes to schools, we're talking of infrastructure, the school campus, the educational aspects, the operational aspects of a school in those 3 spheres. Impact alignment, we saw how it aligns with SDGs when it comes to the green compass. But as you progress into the institutional side, you would see that it aligns. The alignment is also ensured with what are called the industry recognized frameworks for carbon emissions and climate science. So that's the idea, but all of them typically would have the same kind of a UX in terms of how you would use the tool. Now I'm going to spend a little more time on another aspect. I mentioned upfront in the conversation that we are all about tech, user experiences, and some distinctive methods that we've come out with. This is one of them. We call it the climate care maturity model. The context to this one is that we know that the decade ahead, the 10 years from here till 2030, are super crucial to address the climate crisis that we are in. And so we're calling it the decisive decade. This is the whole progression of the industry in the general sense over the last 4 decades. It started the tech decade somewhere in 1990s to 2000s. The data decade with the data crunching became a big element of how industries look at themselves. Then came the customer centricity, which is where the frictionless experiences, the likes of Ubers and Swiggies, made their presence felt. It was all at the click of a button and everything was pretty much handy. The time has come for what is called the decisive decade, wherein the resilience and responsibility balance is becoming a lot more crucial. So the reason I call it the decisive decade is because it's what is essentially a final shot at addressing and mitigating climate change from a corporate sustainability perspective. Definitely, this is the decade to look at. I mean, you could not wait for any more time from a corporate sustainability perspective. Impact of efforts that have been taken up from a corporate sector have been far more sporadic, far more isolated, and so we've got to see how we bring it all together. Boardrooms, when there is externalities that are hitting them, the boardrooms, these leadership teams of the organizations are kind of discussing about how to cushion themselves from these externalities, cushion themselves from the crisis situations that they are being faced with. So those are that's the context. And with that context, what we said is that with that context plus the fact that we talked of something called the systems thinking approach, there's various angles with which we could approach the conversation on corporate sustainability. Differentiated reputation, which is essentially where you're saying you want to set yourself apart as a corporate. That's a value statement that you may be looking at. You could look at strategy and governance and how you make sure that sustainability becomes embedded in your strategy. Employee engagement, how do you make sure that your new age workforce, the millennials, or in fact, prominently the Gen Z workforce, I would say, who look at responsible corporates as a key aspect of their longevity to work with them. How do you kind of drive that kind of employee engagement? How do you kind of come across as not just a do-gooder, doing good, but also as a responsible do-gooder? So you don't have an oversight on climate impacts while you're doing good. Efficient operations, how do you make sure you're running your own operations efficiently? Investor attractiveness, because you would have brought down a lot of risks that you would have otherwise been hit with from a climate change perspective. And finally, I think it's stakeholder engagement. So how do you engage different stakeholders in your journey? If these are the different statements, all of it is being summed together and brought together for you in a 5-step journey. We start with something that is as simple as being responsible in the work that you are currently doing. Nothing new to be done. Do something that you are already doing, but do it in a responsible manner. You up that with bringing in your own commitment internally in the organization by driving a climate science related conversation within your own ops. Then you take it further up with your value chain, your supply chain, your suppliers, and your consumption side of things. Advocate it to them. You become a lot more resilient by kind of addressing climate risks and identifying opportunities arising out of these climate crisis situations. Influencing the industry as a whole would be the nirvana state, if I could call it so, from a corporate sustainability perspective. The reason we call this a climate care maturity model and we call it contextual in the Indian context is because unfortunately we are definitely at the very beginning of our journey on corporate sustainability in India. And so we want to make sure that the baby steps that we take are still thought through, they are modular, yet progressive. So that's the idea of making that 5-step journey happen. And while that 5-step journey happens, there's a constant eye on the stakeholders that are impacted and the scale at which that grows, and the outcomes that are achieved and the scale at which that grows, of course, being reflected with a lot of data capture that will keep happening as we progress further and further. Quite a lot of detail underpins all of this, which I think if somebody's interested, more than happy to discuss in a lot of detail. This is the highest overview that I could possibly give of this climate care maturity model. While that is the climate care maturity model, we talked of the green compass. I did mention the fact that with every segment, we take a very simple learn, act, achieve, celebrate approach. That's the learn, act, achieve, celebrate approach from a corporate perspective. So we do all of these things from a corporate perspective when it comes to learn. How do you up the awareness through workshops? How do you involve in problem-solving programs, the likes of the Cooperado program that we're doing with SusMafia, very enriching 4 quarters, 4 pertinent themes. How do you kind of walk out of each quarter with a plan of action that you could take further into the next phase of act? Then there's the risks and opportunities assessment, which will give you which will open up your eyes. Of course, then comes the ACT part of it, which is where the CCAMM, Climate Care Maturity Model, plays a big role. Achieve is again something you could help your employees do through what we call the Green Compass Plus, which is the Green Compass tool, but custom built for the corporate, for your employees of the corporate. The corporate Green Compass is the variant which we will also use to see how institutional behavior change happens. And of course, the celebrations through the various certifications, the sustainability leaderboard and all of it. So we use a lot of tech solutions in that whole conversation. And that tech solution stack in totality is called the AQ Climate Stack. We call it the Climate Stack at our end, and of which 3 of the tools are what we are using here. We use them here. There are other ones that we use for the other segments, but these are the 3 that we use from the stack in this conversation. In a nutshell,
Anveshi, you're on mute. You're on mute, Anveshi.
Right. Thank you. So I jumped onto the screen, and I think that's when the mute happened. But so in a nutshell, what I'm referring to is that we are talking of consulting as one of our core pieces, education, awareness building, and education as another. Implementation, to make sure that what we talk of as a plan is implemented and the results are clearly documented and seen without any ambiguity. And of course, the technology that drives it all. So that's the package that is we're talking of in totality. Digital solutions come into picture with that, user experiences come into picture, synergies across urban segments. So even if we are talking of engaging with one segment, we are constantly keeping an eye on the fact that there could be an impact on with the fact that there's an interconnectedness with other segments. Expert ecosystem that we could bank on, and finally the impact reports that are literally true by their very nature. No greenwashing of sorts at all. So that's the idea of what this is all about. I think that will sum it all in terms of what we do from a corporate side. The other segments, we've not gone into that, but if again somebody else is interested, more than happy to discuss them in a separate call maybe.
All
Yeah,
right,
Hari,
Anveshi.
I think.
Yeah, that was, yeah. Go on, Ganesh, please.
Hari, I was just saying about to say to stop the recording after this, just for the
Okay.
Q&A.
You want to stop the recording for the Q&A? Okay.
Yeah. Some people would not be wanted to be identified during the discussion phase.